Hello, everyone, and welcome to the live web show, Reimagine Together. I invite you to join me and a wide array of progressive speakers every week who are committed to defining and realizing a thriving humanity future. Yeah, here we kind of get to unleash the inner idealist. My name is Carley Marcelle. I'm your host, a speaker, and the founder of the Match Teen Experience Network, and a guide, so to speak, to our extraordinary collective potential. And this channel is all about helping you to understand what an age of disruption really means, for you to, the impact that it has on you, your organization, and the people in your life, and giving you the resources that you need to not only cope with this new world, uncertain landscape, but to really learn how to thrive and lead in it, because the truth is we're really going to need you to. So if you are interested in empowerment, organizational leadership, and how you can help to consciously create a thriving humanity future, then go ahead and subscribe to the channel, like the video, and I encourage you to also head over to the website, www.matchuteennetwork.com, and sign up for our email list, because we'll have a lot of experiences launching in the months to come, media, gatherings, and unique coaching channels that are actually in development and opening soon. Today, we are going to talk about how to help your people digitalize and how digital transformation is different today than it was even just 3 years ago. And when we look at problems, I really love to look at it from multiple perspectives. So today, we're going to have 3 different perspectives: a CTO, a behavioral change and resiliency expert, and a data security expert and tech product designer. So to get started, we're going to meet Sean Okelly.
Carley, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. My name is Sean Okelly. I'm the VP and head of technology for a company called MEI. What we do is we work with clients in highly regulated spaces. We're a service provider that works for clients in highly regulated spaces, and we really help them manage risk across costs, legal risk, regulatory risk, and ultimately, companies in our space are also ultimately involved in consumer protection, which I'm a very much of a believe in. So I joined the organization earlier this year, and really the intent was to really continue to. The company has SaaS offerings that we provide to our clients, but the idea is to kind of take it to the next level and continue to grow and improve on what we do. So I'm very excited about that. Prior to this role, though, I was a department CIO at the state of Illinois for a couple of years for the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. I was there for a couple of years, like I said. Prior to that, I spent 20 years of my career in the private sector and in a number of different consulting and leadership roles. But I will say my time in government certainly taught me quite a bit, and it was actually one of the highlights of my career. I actually loved serving in government. I think as we look ahead, I would encourage anyone who's ever thought about public service to really consider spending some time in public service in your career. I really believe in that. So nice to be here.
Thanks for being here, and thank you for sharing that. Makes me want to consider it. All right, thanks for introducing yourself, Sean. We'll continue with the conversation, but next up we have Jeremy Treadwell. Jeremy?
Hello, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you? You want to give us a little introduction to yourself and your background?
Absolutely. So my name is Jeremy Treadwell. I am the co-founder of Treadwell Agency, and we focus on human factors, consulting in cybersecurity and privacy, and as a whole, technology innovation. Starting with a kind of digital marketing background, we started to observe that as we introduced new technologies to different industries and different people, there was a gap between what the technology was able to do and how the people responded to it and how they were able to evolve to meet the needs of their organization. And so we began to evolve our organization to focus solely on the the human factor of it all. And so we're really excited that for the last year, we've been developing a product or, SaaS solution that will help organizations better train their users and create mindfulness around security risks and opportunities for the development of a cybersecure culture within their organization. And that product is called SimSIA, and we're hoping to launch in 2021. So we're really excited about that.
Great. Awesome. And you've got a webinar coming up later today on SimSIA as well, right?
Actually, I do. It's moved. We've found a great partner, so we're going to make it on October 15th. So I'll shoot out some details on that as well. Great.
So people can sign up and find out about it then on your website. Is that available?
Yes, absolutely. On Treadwell Agency. That's correct.
Great. Well, thanks for introducing yourself, Jeremy. I'll have you right back, but I'm going to bring on Hanlie next. Hold on.
Hey, Carly. I'm thrilled to be here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm just happy to have all three of you here. It's so fun.
Very exciting.
So can you give us a little intro to your work currently and your background?
Sure. Well, let me start at a different place. I grew up in a town in which Winston Churchill hid in the mines during one of our internal wars against the English many, many moons ago. And so I grew up in a country where it was stilted against diversity and inclusion. So it was a very intolerant, horrible space to grow up in. And for many years, I tried to change people's behavior by myself, growing up as a young person. And as you can imagine, that was very unsuccessful. But during my late teens and early 20s, I stood in awe as the leadership of the country changed and the country itself changed as a result of that. And from that, I became completely fascinated with the fact that if a country can change its behavior and its entire structure, surely so can companies and organizations and communities. And off the back of that, I then began to build Changecraft, which is there to really help people understand how to manage change, how to build change, and how to make it easier, because we are actually, in fact, built for change as human beings. But sometimes we get a little bit stuck in our ways and have difficulty letting go of particular ways of thinking and behaving. And so that's how Changecraft came about.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What a wonderful story. And God, thanks for that scope as well, right? If an entire country can shift, sometimes we forget because not everybody gets to see that in their lifetime. Maybe we'll see it here in the States soon. But, that if an entire country can shift, certainly organizations can make some changes that are for the better. And great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and bring you all in here. And let's go ahead and kick off with a question that I think is really kind of just to set the context a little bit, because we've been aggressively digitalizing for 10 years, right? I mean, longer than that, but I'd say more aggressively the last 10 years. But we've been shifting a lot even in the last few years. So I'd love to hear your perspectives on how you've noticed the change, how you've seen digitalization change in the last few years, and where you think we're going and how it's different. Sean, you want to jump in first?
You want me to start?
And highlight,
okay. All right. Yeah, so a few things. Digitalization, you're right. Digitalization has, we're at least 10 years into it. And, but I think going forward, the biggest thing that I see is acceleration further in that direction. It's not going to happen. When I say acceleration, I mean, what we've seen in the last 10 years or 20 years, it's going to move. That kind of progress is going to it is going to happen in, let's say, the next 5 years, maybe 10. It's going to, so there's going to be an acceleration happening. And so in particular, what I have noticed and what I think is happening is, one, there's a switch in the model for many organizations. The model typically in the relationship between your business units and your technology team is that the kind of classic relationship is that it's a business-led organization. Business-led IT is the term you sometimes hear, and that so far has been the traditional way that organizations have operated. That they have their business model and IT is there to support whatever that business model is, which is true, and that's what's existed up to this point. What I think is happening, though, is that there's going to be a switch where organizations are going to, I don't want to say cease being business led. That's probably not accurate, but it's going to be much more tech led organizations, and that means that when you go to market, you're going to market with a suite of products and services, and many of those products and services are going to be technology products and services. And so, as opposed to offering, some other, collection of services that might be more people focused. So that, I think, is going to happen more and more. And so, what does that mean in terms of what I think we're going to see is more and more CIOs and CTOs are going to be asked to take on even more responsibility to help drive those innovations and those changes within organizations. I do really think that, and so not every organization is going to be able to culturally make that shift, but the ones that do will, I think, position themselves to do well in the coming years. So that is, I think, the leading point that I would make.
Great.
The couple of other points that I would make are, I think it was 2018 or 2019, somewhere end of 2018, beginning of 2019, I can't remember the exact time frame, where data for the first time became, on a per unit basis, became more valuable than oil. You may have seen news reports on that. And so what that means is that data, while organizations have always had data, your ability to position your organization to have data that is valuable not only to your organization, that you can cycle back and learn from, but that is also valuable to others, that you can have folks, other organizations connecting to you, subscribing to you, and really positioning yourself at the center of a marketplace. That's really what that does. I actually kind of view data almost as, in a sense, as the new electricity. If you have electricity flowing through your organization, you're going to do great in the coming years. If you don't, and if you're not positioned in some part as part of a marketplace, in whatever space your organization plays in, if you're not able to do that, effectively leveraging APIs and other mechanisms for accessing data, it's going to be hard to continue to compete as we move further into digitalization. So I would say that as a second point. I'll stop there. I don't know. I have two other points I can make too, but I want to make sure I don't go on for too long. Do you want me to make those other points, or?
Can you maybe just land on them without necessary? We'll maybe elaborate in conversation, but I'd love to hear you land.
Sure. So those were the first 2 points. The third point is digital identity. That's going to completely change the landscape in many ways. And then the fourth point I would make is there's a tsunami of automation coming, and our emerging technology is going to facilitate that, but it is going to hit areas that haven't so far been impacted by automation. So in the space that I'm familiar with, in the legal space, regulatory space, government space, we're going to start seeing more and more automation in those spaces where we haven't really seen that yet up until this point. So I'll stop there.
Great. That is some great foundational, pillars. And Hanlie, Jeremy, other things to add or just to elaborate on those points, either way.
I'll let Jeremy go because he has been doing lots of nodding. So
yes, right.
It needs to be natural to giving the stage.
Oh, you're on mute, Jeremy.
No, you're absolutely right. So to answer your question, Sean, you hit the nail on the head. I have an article on my blog talking about how data is the new currency, and being able to trade that fluently, to be able to aggregate it into new algorithms and AI with the use of different, methodologies that we're using that data for, whether it be biometric or understanding the customer experience and the journey, whether it be product intelligence or business intelligence as a whole, is all about tracking the movements. I consider that like the digital swarm theory, right? You can understand how all of your players, all of your customers, and even how your competitors move by analyzing that data through the sets of algorithms that we can now produce. But the other point that I wanted to bring up with how I track digitalization is on the workforce. So looking at things like the gig economy, which is a huge shift in how we used to work. My grandfather worked for 40 plus years at GE, doing all sorts of things, but that was his career and he has a pension from that. Now we're seeing a shift to people having 5, 6, 7 different streams of income through these different short time gigs, right? So we're shifting even in how we engage in work and also the breadth of expertise that we have, right? If I'm doing 5 different roles, that means I have 5 different skill sets that I have to offer, as opposed to one job I'm working 9 to 5 doing the same thing for 40 plus years. And then even looking at what I've recently learned is coined as new collar, when people go through accelerators or boot camps or different types of digital vocational schools to be able to change. I met a gentleman when I was with Accenture. He went to his undergrad was in technical lighting as he was in theater, and he wanted to pursue different things. So he went to, I think it was Northwestern, had a coding boot camp for 6 months. And he came out and he landed as a, developer within one of the teams I was managing on Accenture. So it's this whole swing of people being able to re-educate themselves, really reintroducing the concept of vocational schools on top of or in place of a traditional college education. Especially in the cybersecurity industry, you see that a lot with people going to school, learning a trade for over the course of 6 months or even sometimes 6 weeks, and then being able to land and get a certification and land themselves in a close to, or if not 6-figure salary, being able to contribute to the workforce that we're missing in certain places. So I think those, along with what Sean was saying about technology and the industry we're seeing is in finance with Bitcoin and the data revolution with data mining and data centers and AI algorithms. Those are 2 ways that I really try to make sure that I'm tracking the huge swings that we're seeing in digitalization.
Great. Hanlie, something to add?
Yeah, I think for me, what I've seen is in the last decade is that digitization from a human perspective, I think has been quite shallow as an experience. And I know I'm sticking my head out there, but that it's been sort of a nice to have, it's been sort of entertaining, it's been gamified, it's been all those kinds of things, which is totally fine. There's no issue with it. But what I'm hoping to see what will happen in the next decade is that it will become a little bit more meaningful and connected to some human values, beliefs, purposes, if you like. So if it can find another layer at which to connect and help. And I think it will always be this dichotomy between it being fluffy and frou-frou and something that really connects with human beings and makes their lives easier and contributes in a way. And I'm not quite seeing there. I think we're moving towards it, but we're not quite there yet. And so that's what I would hope is going to be seen. What I have also noticed is that when it comes to adopting digitization in certain aspects, it's not yet, it's still an art, it's not a science. We still have to do a lot of hand waving and figuring out and influencing. And that's really the space that we work in, is to say, how do we get people to begin to adopt these things so that you can have your data, so that you can have your electricity, because that is absolutely, I think, essential to every company. It's the bloodstream, right, of every company. But there are still a lot of things that have to be figured out in that space.
Absolutely.
And that makes me very excited because I get to play with the things that don't go in straight lines, because they don't work the way that you hope they will work.
Tech can track it, but the truth is it's going to be great. And on that, so as we look at how things are changing, I would love to just kind of elaborate. Most of us are kind of familiar with why these efforts fail and old school change management. And, we have this idea in our heads. So many leaders, right, are like, I'm going to invest in, I won't call out specific brands, but this big, HCM tool or this, this other, and have this giant implementation that I'm going to spend hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on this implementation. And then they don't work. They're not configured. And there's this idea that the tech on its own is going to figure things out. And so I would love to hear kind of each of you speak to what your journey has been, or what you've noticed, and why these implementations fail, and kind of the top, reasons that come up. It's like it's always the blind spot. We just miss it.
I'd like to pick up there, because I think Sean mentioned that it used to be sort of business-led or systems-led, and now it's perhaps going to be more tech-led. And for me, that's like, well, you're just making the same mistake again, because it has to be human-led. So if you bring the humans to the front of the tech, then I think your adoption might spike a little bit, or be more sticky, if you like. But that's obviously my perspective, because that's the perspective I come from.
No, I couldn't agree more. I've had the pleasure of doing some consulting work around the psychology of adoption, right? So the technology plan is in place. They have the roadmap, they have all of the pieces built, but the question is, how do you get humans on board? And whenever facing with that, I always try to layer it with, there's a whole industry around service design that actually maps human empathy around, and the human journey mapping of a digital experience. And so part of that work is really bringing the human along on the technology journey to understand how they will feel when using this, and what are potential friction points when the human is engaging with this system. And all too often, and especially with the consulting background, we've seen just the consulting arm just building the technology solution as built by technologists who innately understand, or who are pushing the envelope, without much consideration for the humans that will actually be using this tool, their thoughts and opinions, and what's in it for them, so to speak, to help them rationalize and motivate, right, that change dynamic of this new incumbent technology.
Great. Yep.
Yeah, and Hanlie, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I couldn't agree with you more. The hardest part of change, and I think one of the biggest reasons for failure, going to the question, is around cultural change and the human side of change. There is no question. And you're right. So ultimately, humans do have to be at the front of all of it, whatever that change looks like. Just a point of clarification: when I said tech-led, what I really meant was talking about the technology product, the products and services you go to market with are going to be more tech-led, but at the front of that are humans. So you're absolutely right, no doubt. But I think cultural change is the hardest part of any kind of change. Whether it's with your customers and the way your customers have gotten used to interacting with you as an organization, or internally, the change for folks internally. So that to me is the hardest thing, and the reason is because anytime people just get used to doing things a certain way, they get used to the way that they see your organization, the way that they interact with your organization, that sort of gets embedded into the behaviors that people have. And again, that could be internal or external folks. So the human side of change is always the more difficult side. But and if there's an expectation of perfection out of technology, then there's going to be a lot of disappointment. There's no doubt. No
it's like
doubt.
Expecting perfect humans.
Yeah.
All kinds of problems.
Yeah, there's no doubt that technology is imperfect. But in the end, there are certain problems that organizations have that technology still has difficulty solving. But in the end, making sure that people are on board, that you're bringing people along, that you're having empathy, is I think at the front of that. In one conversation I had recently, I was talking about how you start your career, and a lot of what you're doing, regardless of what space you're in, whether it's information technology, finance, marketing, whatever, you're in the earlier in your career, you're focused more on the logical or technical aspects to whatever it is that you do, the mechanics of whatever it is that you do. Mm-hmm. But as you move along in your career, and certainly as you mature as a person, and you start to take on more leadership roles, I think, at least certainly I've seen this with myself, and and other folks, that I talk to, is that the right side of your brain ends up actually being needed more when you're further along. And the reason is exactly for this change reason. The ability to have a certain emotional intelligence, and the ability to recognize the challenges that other folks have, to try to think about what they're going through, not just what your priorities are. I think those are aspects of change that often get forgotten, exactly for the reason that you mentioned, Carley, is that sometimes people think that you can implement some big piece of technology and that's going to somehow solve your organization's problems, and it can, but not necessarily. It's all a big it depends.
Absolutely. So. And before we move on to the next point, I would love to just kind of add this in, because I think it's really important. Why do you think we have, well, Hanlie, I know from a behavioral perspective, you would probably be all over this, but when it comes to, I feel like there's awareness. Do you think there's enough awareness of the fact that the human side of change is neglected and needs to be addressed? Or do you think that we have the awareness, we just don't have the know-how? Because why do you think these cultural changes aren't happening? Right, from leadership.
From my perspective, I think it's because it's been relegated to a specific area or department. Like, that's change management, or that's HR, or that's this bit. And I think it's beginning to come alive in the CTO space and the technology space. And there's a high level of awareness around it. But we're still trying to figure out how exactly to do that, how to put it together, what will work. And I think that's imminent. I think it's happening as we speak. And I think it's just the nature of the evolution of something. And as Sean has said, realizing that we're at a certain point, there's a piece missing. Now going to look for where are these things, because they're out there, and how do we begin to blend them in and work them in, and what does that look like, and how does that disrupt the system that's already been put together, where it says, if I build something cool, then everyone's going to want to use it. Maybe not. All right, so there's another piece missing, and we'd be having to build that in. And I think that's kind of where we are at the moment. That's what I think.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add, Jeremy or Sean?
No, Jeremy, go for it.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think so often the human element is left at the wayside. And I think it's really important to really be mindful. A lot of my work evolves around product development. So helping businesses develop lines of products and introducing that to their customers. And so often we forget that we're building a product. And typically, right, you have a login button, you have features and things that customers can do in the product. So often I get the question of, do we need to build an onboarding? Do we need to teach people how to use this product? And I'm like, yes, that is the first thing we need to do. We need to inform them of what they can do and how to do it within this platform. And, there's concepts called ubiquitous design. Like, for example, 90+% of the websites you go to, the login button is in the top right-hand corner of the screen. There's a reason for that, because that's become a pattern. It's become a ubiquitous pattern within the human experience. That's what we go to look for. You see the logo in the top left-hand corner. You see the login in the top right-hand corner. Yes, we can design all new systems and completely transform that, but that will be a barrier for the users. So we have to mitigate design and thinking about things innovatively and the changes we want to make to a system, to looking at what patterns have the humans begun to kind of ubiquitously use that we can assimilate into the product to make it easier for the product to be utilized, experienced, and to create a frictionless experience for the user.
Yeah. And I kind of sometimes wonder if this is a role where AI can play more, it can add a lot of value. Not that I'm an expert in that field at all, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, surely there can be something that can be utilized or applied, so that it does that piece for you without anyone have to think about it or get involved, I suppose.
Absolutely. I'm working on that, Hanlie. It's a tough sell, because it's all about shifting the dynamic, right? I mean, one example I use to paint this picture, if I'm trying to log into, say, Facebook, and I've failed twice, it shouldn't take to me to fail 4 or 5 times before something says, hey, maybe you've forgotten your password. Let us reset it for you. We see this IP address is consistent. We see the computer MAC address is consistent. You've logged in from this computer before. So let's expedite that process rather than going through all the fail safes, then allowing the user to simplify their experience and be able to log in or reset their password or get a passphrase, text to them, like into these 6 digits, right? There are ways that we can truncate the failures or the pain points of a system if we are able to use AI and be able to acknowledge what the intent and the spirit of what the user is trying to do beyond just the technical process of accomplishing that goal.
Yeah,
I will say this, and it's for this exact reason that I mentioned digital identity earlier. So imagine a world where a digital identity likely will be done on blockchain technology. Imagine a world where that login button that we just spent a few minutes talking about goes away and passwords go away. And when you access a site, you just float in. I'll stop there.
Keep that in your head.
World.
Imagine that world.
I love it.
Floating into what?
Where? Who?
Where we are? Hold on. I need some change management.
but that's this, like the theory of, someone asked me recently, if I had to build a door, what type of door would I build? And for me, it's automatically this Star Trek door. You walk, it senses your presence, it responds to you, it acknowledges your identity, and is able to not be a barrier, and it doesn't require any physical manipulation, especially due to COVID. We don't want to touch anything anymore. So it's that same concept that Sean is talking about, this digital identity. You are able to interact with digital things around you the way that you would interact with physical things that are able to, one, acknowledge who you are, to provide access, simply and easily, but also remove that barrier for you to be able to access and complete the task.
Yeah. And actually, as we look at security data, right, I would love to follow up actually, Jeremy, with some of your work as we look at digital identity and this idea of floating through a door. Great. But let's talk about some of the risks, that come with, and when we look at digitalization, why it's so important that we really think this through and get humans to adopt, and some of the work that you do, what drew you into data security and privacy right now.
I mean, Carla, we've really hinted on it recently. For me, it came from as a design-driven person and a technology-focused person, I started to see the misgivings between these two industries and said, wait a minute, there's a gap here, and it truly is the human element. And so because I'm design-driven, I started to notice these things in my consulting engagements. And my wife is also in cybersecurity, and so she would yell in the background when I'm, doing a data migration or something. Hey, is that encrypted in transit or at rest? And I'm like, neither, because it was out of scope. And, it's an inside joke, but it's one of those things where...
Tech joke. Sorry, I have to fill in too. So Jeremy's wife she is an industrial organizational psychologist. Also, so just when we talk about the human factor, so I just had to give that context real quickly.
Psychologist in cybersecurity, so we have these amazing technology fights. The way we look at it is, I build it, she secures it, and we just fight over the most amazing concepts in our household. But to answer your question, that's how we felt. That's how we moved into this space, and really identifying the fact that humans don't understand the technology the technology route that we're heading down. They don't understand. So even privacy is something I'm really passionate about. This whole data migration movement and the way the laws are written in the US, the technology companies technically own all of the data that they aggregate about a person, and all of the data that they're able to infer based off of demographic or algorithmic utilization of that data. So it's almost like a derivative set of data that they're able to infer, thinking about product suggestions. If you have 10,000 people who, if they bought product A, and you recommend product B, that they are either in the same area or have some sort of similarity, that they even search for that same product, they're 80% more likely to buy product B because they were suggested off of product A. That's derivative data that they're able to ascertain based off of just patternistic, humanistic behaviorism, right? The idea that I'm suggested a topic, and I can go into nudge theory and architecture, and I'm going to stop myself there.
I mean, I would love to. Might throw everyone a little bit.
But at the end of the day, the reason why we really evolved our business into focusing on the human element of security and privacy is because we saw this gap. And because we have a background in digital communications and marketing, we thought we could absolutely stand in that gap to be able to help inform users of how to be safe online. Because as we know, with each passing birth cohort, we are more and more digitized, and more of our experiences, even our relationships, are digitized, which creates more and more opportunity for threat actors and social engineering to take place. And so we want to be able to help people be mindful and not just aware of the risks of their behaviors online, what they expose about themselves online, and how that could potentially be used against them. At the same time, we want people to flow through the door and have frictionless experiences, but we want to be mindful of ensuring that this is the right door that we're going into, and that we have the right tools and the right technology in place to be able to properly identitize that person, so to speak.
Yeah. And as you talk about, just the risk of not doing this work, right? If data is not controlled and not fully understood and not done mindfully, if organizations don't take care of certain security protocols as we gather so much information, there's a lot of risk to all of us, to our infrastructure.
All of it can go down, and we do not want that. And most of cybersecurity is this doom and gloom, right? You lose your business, you shut down your business, your identity will be stolen, your credit will be ruined. But all of that is actually true. You know what I mean? Like when TransUnion and all of these different companies are experiencing data breaches, your social security, your credit card information, all of that is floating on the dark web for someone to surreptitiously use for their own benefit, whether that be a foreign, domestic, threat actor, or a domestic threat actor, right? Our data is now floating in this ether. The best way I like to paint this picture is your Wi-Fi. If you're on the airport using Wi-Fi, picture someone sitting right next to you that's sniffing everything that you're viewing online, every text message you send. It's unsecured. They can absolutely come and see what you're doing because Wi-Fi is just data in the air. The same way we could pick up radio signals. If you have the right tool set and know what you're looking for, you can absolutely glean so much about a person by what they Google, what they search. And if you can ascertain their passwords, then you have access to their bank account and other personal records that they can then use to, for ransomware. We've seen a huge boost since, school has started back up. Different counties have been locked out of their systems due to ransomware. So this threat is very real, and people are losing access to, losing money, losing their reputation, right? They're losing their sort of personal data and personal experience and being exposed in digital spaces, right? We've seen nudes and all sorts of things leaked online. So the threat is very, very real of people losing their reputation and losing their business and having to pay untold sums just to gain access to their systems again due to ransomware. So the threat is very, very real, but we want to focus on, we believe that humans are capable of being safe online if they understand the threats and are mindful of how to engage safely and securely.
Oh, I'm glad that I'm not the one losing my mind, because if I say that to my friends, they're all like, what are you talking about? Stop being so neurotic.
No.
And it's true. It is totally true. I mean,
I will say too, not to go down. This is a bit of a totally different rabbit hole, but I'll just drop this bomb into here. Quantum computing is going to accelerate. When I talk about acceleration, quantum computing is going to accelerate everything Jeremy just mentioned.
5G.
So I'll just drop that bomb and step away.
Yeah.
Quantum computing, I'm out.
5G and quantum computing.
Quantum
and then
computing, right. Mic drop, right.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Jeremy, as much as I'm very pro-human, good luck with making people mindful about their security. We can't even get them to eat properly to stop diabetes. It's like, this is going to be tricky, man.
Yeah. No, we and beyond just, of course, we're a B2B solution, right? So SimSea is a B2B solution focusing on cyber mindfulness and creating cyber hygienic culture. So not only are we just saying, here, we'll teach your people, but we're also giving the organization tools to measure the maturity of the organization's cyber hygiene. But we're also looking for opportunities to give back, right? So we're looking for grants and other opportunities through our nonprofit to be able to educate the masses on how to be safe online. There's a number of symposiums, just one recently in Georgetown, about the surveillance, economy of surveillance that we're having, and more people, especially communities that are disenfranchised, are having their data used against them and having data stolen from them. So there's a lot more even economically at play, and we'd love to be a solution to helping people be mindful of their security solutions and how they engage online. The same way that we, I remember growing up on stranger danger and don't take candy from people you don't know, or be mindful of trick or treat, right? There's all sorts of danger. I mean, these are physical dangers, but I want to be able to do that for this generation and to encourage everyone to be mindful of who they're talking to online in these random chat rooms. Like, are they who they say they are, right? Are they, intentionally seeking to get data from you for something, right? So that's type of translation.
Yes, sorry, I'm gonna have to redirect us real quickly. I think, yes, no, do we have?
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
Another concern that I have, I don't know if you're still on concerns, but one of the concerns I have is how do we get people to disconnect? Because one of the things that I've recently noticed is that everyone is on all the time, and it is so unhealthy from a variety of points of view, from a brain point of view, from a health point of view. And I don't know why it is that some of that is not being discussed and designed into some of the products or some of the digitization approaches. Just say, okay, there is a time that you actually just have to be not online, go away, use locked out, see you later, 24 hours later, something.
Yeah.
But go ahead. Okay, I'll stop.
We're on this track. We're actually going to answer this question. I just want to kind of reframe it a little bit. So as we look at why, right, if we want people to change, and digitalization can do some great things. So I want to start with you, actually, Hanlie. This is a question to how. Let's look at why. Before we tell everybody, you got to digitalize, walk through this door where your identity is going to be known and your whole life is going to be up in the cloud of some sort. Let's look at why, and your study has been, obviously, I've always been interested in studying the human mind and the human spirit, and why and how technology can actually, you've had a very deep interest in technology and how it can actually help us to advance the human mind and the human spirit. And so I would love to just hear you kind of speak to where you've seen it work, where some of the opportunities are that you notice where it does do good things.
So look, I mean, there's nothing that's all evil and all good. So it depends who's using it and for what intention they have. And I think that's the thing that matters. And so you will always see that there are things going on that you are unhappy with, and it is not working, and it is harmful to human beings, to communities, to society, etc. When it comes to applying those things to be helpful, to contribute to society, community, and individuals, to further what matters to humanity, I don't know if I've actually seen anything to that scale yet, to be perfectly honest with you. I've noticed that there are mindfulness apps, and there's, insight timers, and there's all those kinds of things that bring together people who are like-minded, I guess. And I'm sure there are other things that are moving in that direction. But as I said right in the beginning, I think we're at this transition point where we're coming out of the shallow end and hoping to go a little bit deeper and a bit more meaningful. And I'm hoping that some of that will emerge. So there's nothing that I can point to right now to say to you, this is a great thing. This is the thing that I think is really going to move humanity forward and contribute as a whole. It might be out there. I'm just not aware of it.
Sean or Jeremy, any thoughts on just kind of where you've seen instances, where you've seen technology in your experience dramatically improve when you think of human spirit, human mind, not just business efficiency, which I know is important and they go together, but I do want to pull out human mind, human spirit. I think that needs to be at the forefront.
Jeremy, you want to go, or would you like me to?
Sure, go ahead,
okay. Sean. The one example I would give, very recent example that's very real, I think, to all of us across the world, is the conferencing softwares that we all became used to during COVID. Yes, that's of course not the same as being in the same room with somebody and being able to hug someone, but man, that had to really help when we were all isolated, and many of us are still kind of isolated. and to be able to just see someone's face and have a conversation, not to be corny, but I mean, that is a wonderful thing. And luckily, we are now 20 years into, or 20, more like 30 years into the digital, in the internet age, because we had all the infrastructure, we had those tools available to us. So when this pandemic hit, I mean, if it had happened 20 years ago, connecting with people would have been far more difficult. It makes you kind of wonder how people got through the Spanish flu 100 years ago. How did they do it and maintain the connections that they had with their communities and their families and whatnot? So I would throw that out there as something to think about in terms of being optimistic, for sure.
Great. Jeremy, anything to add to that?
Absolutely. So I recently read a book called, as a Christian, it's called Disruptive Witness, Seeking Truth in a Distracted Age. And one of the quotes that I love from the book was saying the major trend that he saw was this practice in continuous engagement in immediately gratifying activities that resist reflection and meditation. And a culture of being consistently connected through science and technology, we have driven this always connected space, and we're always distracted. So there's never enough time devoted in our day to self-reflection, to anchoring ourselves, to meditation, to really having that self-reflection, which causes growth. And so the book talks about this idea of you're so distracted that you can't even contemplate your own sins and feel guilt for them. So we're living in this day and age where sources of truth have been distracted. And I'm trying not to go too far left here. The focus is that we, as technologists, I have to require myself to turn it off sometimes and to disconnect and to disengage and to stay focused on one topic long enough to do research or to just internally research or have conversations with my family. A lot of times, and you'll see this, I think everyone noticed this, when you're having a conversation with someone and a question comes up, oh, did they do this? Did they do that? Or what was the fact about this? Or how many is this are there? My natural inclination is to go Google it. And that causes a rift in that conversation because I'm not engaged at that moment. I'm not, I'm distracted by seeking that truth or seeking the details, as opposed to just having a conversation and continuing the point. And so I've actively begun to stop myself from, disrupting that conversation to engage in technology, as opposed to continuing the conversation and continuing the reflection and the introspection that can come from that conversation.
I want Google to say, I don't know, think about it for a minute, then come ask me again. You can figure it out by yourself. Just try.
Right. We can build that in.
Yes, they've talked about it. Yeah, you need to unplug now.
Right. I mean, that's where screen time came from. Apple saw the need for people to be able to monitor how much. I mean, because we all know that products are using dark patterns to keep humans engaged and entertained. The minute your phone buzzes, it's a psychological need. It's like a Pavlov's dog training to go see what the notification was. What's for you, right? What have you been waiting on? And so now we're starting to see a shift. And you're right, Hanlie. It is about mindfulness, and there are apps that help you become more mindful, but they don't teach you to disengage. They teach you to use technology to be mindful, but that's still focusing on an external source as opposed to an internal source of meditation, mediation, and equanimity in your soul.
100%.
So as we look at the big picture, the reimagined state of kind of what where we're going, what an effective, I just want to make sure, is audio okay right now? Can you guys hear? Okay. So as we look at the big picture, what would a digitally resilient company or culture sort of look like, right? A company that can do this kind of that can transform, that can digitalize quickly and consistently, and use it to actually become a healthier organization. Right, so this is a big challenge. This is a big challenge, a big imaginary. We don't have to build a perfect picture, but if there are just some thoughts on what that would look like.
I mean, this is just my own, my personal opinion, but my hope is that organizations as they become more digital, that perhaps cuts out cost in certain ways, and it allows them to to give attention to things that all organizations probably should be giving more attention to. So things like environmental consciousness, focusing on your community and social good. To me, those, hopefully the organizations have more ability to give attention to those things that we do need to be giving attention to, in my view. So.
For me, we're talking about organizations, but an organization is just a collection of human beings. So for me, that is a leadership problem. And it's a problem that leadership, whoever is in control of that particular organization, big or small, has to take responsibility for. It has to land somewhere, it has to live with someone, because from my perspective, if you talk about the organization, it just falls through the cracks. And I don't know where that starts. Maybe that starts with the CTO. Maybe that starts with you guys to say, hey, it is also our responsibility to say, here's how you could do it, that it makes sure that there is some kind of balance. There's some kind of contribution that's built into the systems that we built and the systems that we offer. I don't know where else it would come from, but it has to be baked into an approach or the leadership of an organization.
Great.
I think for me, it truly starts with cognitive diversity and having a shared value system across the organization. I've seen too much of groupthink and too much of just kind of this monolith approach to business ruthlessness, as opposed to building a business for humans, that empathize with humans and really value a diverse mindset, a diverse background, a diverse group of experiences, globalization, right? Being mindful of how different countries will perceive different things. I think that is truly, sounds counterintuitive, but it really, to me, is how you build a technology savvy business that can advance and scale. And the biggest thing is change, right? The change management piece of constant evolution that has to come from having a shared set of values and listening to each other in order to drive what that looks like.
Great. And as we talk about, one of the title of today's talk is how to prepare your people for this digitalization. So one of the things that we've talked about is why, right? It's kind of reframing that maybe there's a leadership reframe that needs to happen too. Like, why are you pushing the tech that you are? Let's make sure that we're coming at it from the right space, because it's hard to get people to change when you don't give them a good reason to do it. And making them more efficient is not a good reason. So they don't really care. So if we could maybe, if each of you want to highlight some small perspective shifts, Hanlie, you went through leadership, but some other ones, small perspective shifts or small actions that leaders can take today that would help them to prepare people for healthy digital transformation. Sean, you want to start?
No, I'm still thinking about that one. I need to think for a minute. Would someone else like to go?
Yeah,
That's a
I'll
hard
give it a
question.
go.
I mean,
it is a hard question.
Yeah. Excellent question. Yeah.
From my perspective, this is really what we do. And I haven't in the beginning said anything about Changecraft and what we do. Yes. What we do is we offer a framework that we know will give people the tools, the methods, and the ability to influence that change in a constructive and healthy way, so that they can work through thinking about the self. What is the meaning for this person? What matters? What are their values and beliefs? Thinking through social. How do people interact? How do we contage each other with our behavior? How do we bring that into play? What is happening in terms of systems? Yes, frictionless. Let's make it frictionless. Let's make it easy, just what Jeremy was saying. How can we make our systems jive with humanity as well as with the organizational goals and outcomes? And then how do we use our physical spaces and our virtual spaces to encourage that kind of adoption? What can we build in there that will help people, trigger people, or remind people, or add another layer? And inside of each of those contexts, there is a formula at play for change, where if people are trained in knowing and understanding it and noticing it, it helps them understand, oh, I see what's happening now. I don't have the capability or the confidence to do this thing, so I need training or I need practice. Or, you know what, I'm just not inspired to use this. I couldn't care about gamification or whatever, blah. So what do we find that inspires them and moves them? Or what are the barriers that are getting in their way, and how do we overcome those barriers? And what are the temptations that are going to draw them away from you wanting them to adopt something, or adopt a new behavior, or find a new behavioral pattern around it? And as you were saying earlier, Jeremy, also the little login button, it's a behavioral pattern. It's been set up, and it's a temptation in a way, and it might even be an obstacle. How do we figure out how to train people to be aware of these different pieces that are at play so that they can utilize it to encourage change and to allow people to adopt new habits over time? And again, it's not a 5-minute solution. It takes time. Human habits take time. They take 60 days. They take 200 days. They don't take 28 days.
Nobody likes that.
Nobody
likes
likes
that.
I'm going to keep on saying it, and they can throw tomatoes, facts are facts. But just to give people time, and that's the other thing. Human beings evolve, and I think technology is evolving at a faster pace than human beings are necessarily adapting and adopting. So give them a little bit of time and give them the tools that they need to be able to move along with technology and the changes that come with it.
I love that. So if we do break down, all the stuff that you guys do, right? You have so many bits and pieces that you can get people started. Mm-hmm. But if we just looked at a small step, is just giving people thinking about these things. If we can just break it, just take some time and some space to think about these things, that people need tools.
Yeah.
In order to change.
Absolutely. So
great.
I'm ready with my answer now, but I don't want to cut Jeremy off. I'll let Jeremy please go, but I just want everybody to know I'm ready.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Great. Jeremy, go ahead, and then we'll move over.
So I was going to start off with a joke by saying, I would love it if I could say you can't spell evolution without error. I don't think that's factual yet, but the idea is that leaders do need to expect error, both in themselves and in those that they're leading and those that are on the periphery, on the outside of that change bubble. And you have to be mindful of that. I have bullet points here. So the second bullet point I have is a word that I love, is vision casting. Leaders need to be able to cast their vision clearly and to articulate the value of the shared destination and really be able to create a path to get there. They need to be navigators and not just expect everybody to have a GPS and just know how to get there on their own, right? They need to say, come follow me. Yes, there'll be stumbles along the way. Yes, we will all make mistakes. The technology will make mistakes because we still have to build this interface for us to constantly evolve together. And then the last thing that I certainly believe in is building a nomenclature, which I define as a shared vocabulary of the present and the future. If a leader can do these three things, then they can absolutely create a space for humans to be human, but to evolve with a shared, one, knowledge of the future, two, expectation that failure will happen, but three, being able to speak of the present and the future intelligently and have the same definition in mind.
Great. I'm going to break it down one step further just to make it the one simple step, because I do love the first thing. I know, because it's just, this is a big thing. So one simple step, that what I heard in the beginning that I really love, that I think we all forget, is expect errors.
Yes.
This idea that you're going to get it right from the beginning is a huge, talk about a barrier, just a problem with how we, expecting perfection in these transitions. And we're iterating so quickly that it's like, you're not going to, there's no such thing as getting it right. It's just getting it better. It's so great.
Constant improvement and constant development.
Yes.
I was going to say, Sean, let's see if you can stick to one thing, because I think Jeremy and I have failed spectacularly at that.
No, you've done great.
No, but we are coming close to time, so I will keep it very short. I will keep it to one word. The question was, what can you do today? And in my view, the answer is go back to your organizations and listen. Don't talk, listen. And listening demonstrates that you care. It demonstrates it demonstrates an aspect of human, emotional understanding and emotional intelligence, and it covers many things that humans that's important to humans, and it's showing that you care. It's showing that that you're considering different points of view, that you want people to be a part of the process. That to me is that's what I try to do. So listen.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all so much for joining in on the conversation today. I really appreciate your time and brains at the table, and hearts at the table too, right? Unleashing your idealist. It's hard to do these days. So thank you for doing it. And if anybody who's watching wants to connect with Hanlie, Jeremy, or Sean, their LinkedIn and their information and links are in the video description below. I'm going to go ahead and close out the show. Thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And if you want, yeah, absolutely. If you're looking to learn more about the Machuteen Network, you can go to MachuteenNetwork.com. Give me just everybody's over here. And please do also be aware that we have 2 events that are going to be coming up in the next 2 weeks. So next week's show is Brands You Can Trust with Daryl Travis, who is the founder and CEO of Brand Trust. We'll be talking about the ever-evolving brand and how and why you need to start thinking about where truth belongs in brands. And then the following week, we have leadership gatherings, which are really just all about an intimate space to create more quality relationships and take that time to reflect about how and what kind of transformation we're leading and how we're doing it. And so that'll be on the 15th. You can find all information on the website. Thank you all for joining, and I look forward to seeing you next week.